Over the weekend it was raining quite a bit, and this cherry tree that has been leaning pretty hard for quite a while finally came down here. So I want to show you guys how I would prepare this tree to make spoon blanks and also material for bowls. You can see there's quite a bit of curvature here in the base of the tree. Over time, this other tree here, this chestnut oak, started to crowd the cherry, so it started to grow off to the side here, and eventually it just was growing so far off, it uprooted itself. So looking at the base here, where the trunk is curved like this, most likely the fibers are in compression, and that's going to give us kind of curly figure in the wood. You kind of see it coming through here. And for spoons, I like to be picky. I'm not really interested in curly wood, although it's very pretty, it is more challenging to carve. And so with this kind of material, generally what I'm going to do is try and cut it up for bowls. If we look down here all the way at the base, let's see, we're at about 8 inches across. So that's going to be good for, small salad bowls or cereal bowls or whatever. And I'll get a nice figure there, and then I can sand it away rather than relying on carving with my knives, where that change in direction is going to make it rather hard to get good cuts. So towards the base, most likely, I'm going to stick with bowls. As I'm looking at this too, because this tree grew here in the yard, a tree that grows in the yard tends to have a lot of branches. You can see all throughout the kind of middle section here, we have a lot of branches. And these branches, again, are going to cause the grain to be all wavy and kind of crazy. So I'm going to try and avoid areas like that for spoons in particular. So really the best sections are sections like this, where for a few feet, we really have no interruption and no branches. If we look just a little bit further down on the trunk, although we don't see any of those branches, we can see evidence that they were here. Even this little bump probably indicates that there was a branch there that, died and was grown over. That's going to create unpredictable grain that I want to avoid. And we see that on both sides here. Over here too, we have another spot like that. This is where there was a branch. We can even see just a little one popping out there. So if I were starting a spoon, I wouldn't want to have this buried right in the middle of that spoon. I would want to come up from that point. So if I was selecting an area to get that spoon out of, it might be from here to here, or over here. I would cut essentially to the length that I was looking to make the spoon. But because I'm not going to get to using this material immediately, I'm going to try and keep this as long as possible to prevent checking from the ends. If I cut it down to the actual length that I'm looking for, I'm going to, lose a bit of material at either end as that end grain checks. So I'm going to try to keep this as long as possible, while still being manageable, because I want to take this over to the shed. So I'm going to try and cut right down here and free the tree. You can see how it got pulled up over here. So the tree's in quite a bit of tension. I suspect it's going to roll off to the right here. And so I'll try and free it by cutting on the back side there. So for bowls too, typically what I would do is I would just cut to the length of the bowl. If I wanted the biggest bowl I could get out of an 8-inch section here, I would cut to 8 inches. But once again, I'm not going to be using this right away. So I'm just going to kind of create manageable sections that I can move over to where I need it. So I'm going to cut right down here by the base. Probably all the material from here to here is going to be unpredictable, especially for spoons. I might test it out for bowls, but I'll cut my bowls from either end here. So I'm going to cut over here. Right here where we have all these branches and stuff, I know this is just going to be, unusable material in here. So with my chainsaw, I'm going to come right through and cut through here. And, this would be a tough area to cut if I was using a handsaw or an axe or something like that. But with the chainsaw, I can breeze right through those knots. And the reason I'm doing this right on the knot is because with that being unusable material, I won't lose anything if it starts to check in that area. So I'm going to cut right through here. This is a really nice clean section. This is going to be ideal for spoons. Again, right up here, there's a bunch of different branches coming out. So potentially I could cut here, but better yet, I'm just going to clear these branches out, come up a few more feet, and cut here, right through here. Because this section, again, is nice and clear. I can cut up by the branches, and if I lose anything, not a big problem. So as we go up a little bit further into the tree here, things get a little bit less predictable. I'm going to get to the other side here. So as we go all the way up through here, we can see even material like this branch here, about the size of my wrist, maybe a little bit larger actually. We're at about 3 inches. So that would be plenty large enough to make a spoon out of. And it could be very nice too, because with this cherry, we're going to have really nice, distinct sapwood versus heartwood. So I'm going to try and save some of these larger branches through here. I'm also looking for some of these areas where branches are coming together. And in those spaces, I can use those crooks to make either coat hooks, like you might be familiar with from the book Swedish Carving Techniques. I could also use these areas potentially to make ladles, which would be nice and strong as they come through these spots. So up here in particular, what I'm seeing is where that branch joins kind of the larger base of the trunk there. This is going to be a good area for me to get a ladle, a nice strong juncture there. So I'm going to save that. I'm going to cut it extra long if I want a handle that's 10, 12 inches long. I'm just going to cut it to 16 inches, anticipating I'm going to lose some at the end. After I do cut this stuff, I'm going to use a product called Anchor Seal and end coat most of it. Though if I do have a lot of extra space, I'm not even going to bother. Okay, so those are some of the considerations here. This tree is plenty big. I could certainly get hundreds of spoons out of this if I was being careful. But the truth is, I can afford to be picky. There's lots of trees up over there. There's trees all over the place, and things are coming down here in different storms and stuff. So I'll show you how I'm going to go ahead and cut this up using the chainsaw. All right, so I'm making progress with the tree here. It's now down, so it's kind of out of tension. I mentioned these spots where they're going to be good for getting ladles. Let me get on the other side here. So right in here, for example, is going to be kind of a good area to get that ladle out of. So the handle would come down here, the bowl would be here. This little branch presents some problems potentially, but I'm going to try it anyway. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to cut probably right around here, maybe a little bit higher actually, in case I lose some material. And I'm going to cut way down here. I am going to try and preserve this section through here. It's nice and straight, branch free, so that should be pretty good for spoons. Same thing down lower, branch, but we're going to work with that. Looking on the other side too, we have the same kind of thing here, some branches coming in. I think this is probably just too much of a mess for me to really get anything out of. There's so many branches. But the fact that this branch is so clear and curved there, that will give some natural strength and curvature to a spoon. So that's a really good section there. Right down here too, this is probably prime ladle zone. Cut it, probably right in here. Again, preserve some extra length. Cut it through here and have a little bit of extra room for the handle through here. A lot of this stuff I'm going to just leave long and end up just dragging over to my firewood area to cut up with my smaller saw. All right, so we've cut the tree up into manageable sections here. This is the biggest chunk. Again, going to use the base here for some bowls. Looks pretty good, but again, there are knots in different areas. So I'll take some time kind of dissecting this and working around different knots. The base of the tree didn't really flop back into place like I was anticipating, but we can see here the nice dark heartwood and the sapwood. It's going to have some really nice contrast there, which will be good for the bowls or for the spoons. So once I get these larger logs in place, I'm going to coat the ends with Anchor Seal. This is the classic one. I think Anchor Seal 2 is a little bit better, but who knows? You can also do 2 coats and that works great. But that's going to just prevent checking in the wood. You can see too where I did select to cut these pieces here in particular. This is right where we have knots. So you can see the material is not going to be very good in these areas. Sometimes where you have a branch coming in, you can kind of cut this way with the branch. And for a bowl, you can get some nice curly figure in there. But with this, branches kind of radiating out everywhere, it's just going to be tricky. Maybe I could do that here where there's just one branch, but not really going to mess with it. Okay, so everything's cut down to manageable sizes. So in some places there is stuff that's just going to get wasted right here where there's branches, but there's spoons here. This is that spot I described might be really good for a ladle. And I do have a ladle here. And you can see how this kind of was created out of a situation kind of similar to that. And that gives it a lot of strength through there where the grain runs sideways or runs back against itself almost. So I'll take that whole assemblage over to my firewood pile there, coat the ends and save that. Here too, there's a lot that's going to get wasted, but rather than cut it down to size, I'm just going to leave it long and trim it out as I need it. If we look over here, this is where I took a lot of the smaller sections. So I don't know if I'm even going to really use this stuff, but it can be nice if you're making like an eating spoon and you want to get kind of sapwood and heartwood. You can see this is almost all sapwood. So it would give you just a really pale spoon, but that could be interesting. Usually I like to have more of that heartwood, and that I think is more interesting, but I'll cut it, a little bit long and probably end coat it, and worst case scenario, that'll be firewood. But that diameter is fine. That's again about 3 inches. That should be just fine. Here I brought this over just to point out, not going to get spoons out of this section. There's just too many knots through here. So this is just destined for firewood. All right, so that should give you a sense of how to prepare material for spoons and bowls. There were some parts there where the tree was under some tension and stuff, so it can be dangerous. If you're not very familiar with using a chainsaw, certainly consider taking a chainsaw safety course. Always good to have a buddy around too, just to keep an eye on you. But if you have questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. Thanks.